Actually, where is that mute everybody button?
All right.
Adam, you gotta unmute yourself.
Welcome, everybody.
Or if the moderator's not gonna do it, then you have to do it yourself.
I got it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Operation EVAC veteran aboard.
All right, look at that. Rodney from
Airborne.
Operation EVAC. How are you, buddy? All
Pretty
right, guys,
good.
here we go. If you can mute your microphones, we're going to get started. We've hit record, so go ahead and self-mute yourself if you can. If not, Danielle will take care of that, and here we go. All right, good evening and welcome. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. My name is Adam Bramlage. I'm CEO and founder of Flow State Micro, and we've come here tonight to honor veterans and to hear firsthand from some amazing veterans on their personal experiences with microdosing. We've got some amazing people here today, including Dr. James Fadiman, the world's leading expert on microdosing. He's going to join us in about an hour to answer some questions from you, so please feel free throughout this conversation to add questions into the chat that we can later ask to him. So before we start and introduce our amazing team, I'm going to pass it over to Danielle from the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, who's going to share with us an opening poem today from Maria Sabina. If everybody could just take a moment to center themselves, ground their feet on the floor, take your mind and move it into your heart. And Danielle, if you could share this poem with everybody.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you to everyone for being here today and for all of your service to humanity and for taking this opportunity to talk about self-growth and personal development and microdosing some of the most miraculous plants on the planet. So I want to take a moment to honor the land that I'm on right now. I'm currently sitting in Oakland on Ohlone land and giving thanks to our ancestors that came before us. And I welcome you all to let us know where you're tuning in from around the world in the chat, or if you know what kind of land that you're standing on and who you're honoring, to let us know in the chat as well. So here's a prayer from Maria Sabina, and calling in the spirit of Maria Sabina and all of our relations. Cure yourself with the light of the sun and the rays of the moon, with the sound of the river and the waterfall, with the swaying of the sea and the fluttering of birds. Heal yourself with mint, neem, and eucalyptus. Sweeten yourself with lavender, rosemary, and chamomile. Hug yourself with the cocoa bean and touch of cinnamon. Put love in tea instead of sugar and take it looking at the stars. Heal yourself with the kisses that the wind gives you and the hugs of the rain. Get strong with bare feet on the ground and with everything that is born from it. Get smarter every day by listening to your intuition, looking at the world through the eye, through your forehead. Jump, dance, sing so that you will live happier. Heal yourself with beautiful love and always remember, you are the medicine. Maria Sabina.
Beautiful. Thank you, Danielle. We're going to start briefly with just some quick intros to the team. Before we get into the veterans, they're going to be sharing some amazing personal stories. We're just going to give a big shout out to the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, Danielle and Seth, for holding it down for us on the technical side today. We're going to start by giving Seth an opportunity to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his experience, his personal journey, and the mission over at San Francisco Psychedelic Society.
Hey there, everybody. Can you all hear me? You hear me, Adam? Cool. Hey, Danielle, thanks for sharing that. That was really a beautiful poem. And yeah, just Maria Sabina has been such an influential character in my development. She's really known for helping to bring mycelium and mushroom energy to the United States through some of the people who journeyed down there to visit. And to hear those words without even a mention of the sacred medicines that we're so often talking about is really beautiful, just to really help paint that broader picture. And yeah, Danielle and I, we've been working on building the Psychedelic Society, the SF Psychedelic Society, for the past 3 or so years, maybe a little more. And yeah, we've become a registered nonprofit. We've accomplished a lot in a short period of time. We've grown a lot in that same period of time. And a lot of what we're doing and what our mission is to really provide a space for community, for people to get to know one another, for people to build their skills, and to really make sure that there's an opportunity for anybody to learn more about psychedelics, an opportunity for anybody to feel like there's a community of support to help them grow, whether it's because they're facing struggles, they have to overcome shadows in their lives, or they feel great and they just want to get even better. Like, it's all on the table. And yeah, we've had just the luxury of seeing so many different kinds of people come to the Psychedelic Society and get help in one way or another. I think Danielle's going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing, but I'll speak for myself. And a big part of my work has been to bring fungi, to bring psilocybin and the ability to cultivate it to our community, and to show people that it's not that difficult. And, while I know that a lot of people themselves won't actually cultivate it, there should be at least somebody in every community, and it's possible. And I think that that's what makes this medicine and this opportunity one of the most radical in the world, is that it's accessible. It's extremely accessible. Mushrooms grow on some, basically water, the husks of coconuts, and good vibes, basically, good intent at least. And it's been a real honor just to share that knowledge that I've cultivated over the past several years with thousands of people just since coronavirus got started. And, it's amazing that just a tiny little shoebox can produce like hundreds of microdoses, and that could be a supply for one person for a year or more. And while we're doing this in such a place of like love and expansion, it also comes from a place of grief and knowing that there's a lot of hurting in the world, but what can we do with that? We can grow, and we can help each other, and we can get connected. And it's definitely about connection. And I just want to thank everybody for coming here to connect with this information, and the people that are here with us tonight. I know we're going to have a really some powerful stories, and a lot of amazing, people who have done great work. I just want to say thank you to the veterans who are here. And, without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to Adam. Thank you all.
Thank you, Seth. That's awesome. And Seth gives us a great reminder that it is possible for us to grow these mushrooms on our own. So thank you, Seth. Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing with San Francisco Psychedelic Society?
Thanks, Adam. Again, it's an honor to be here with you all and share space with all of you, that I know you all have so much to contribute to this movement. And I'm Danielle. I'm the executive director of San Francisco Psychedelic Society. And I just also want to thank Ryan Miller and Operation EVAC and all the other organizations that are part of putting this on. So thank you all for being here. I overcame a dependency to pharmaceutical drugs, and I know that's a common story and theme amongst veterans. And I'm really excited to connect with more veterans that have overcome similar struggles. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is around supporting people that are overcoming dependency and utilizing psychedelics for personal growth and development out of dependency and addiction, and for mental health and all the ailments that can come from traumatic events that we've been through. So just honoring each and every one of you for all that you've been through. And I look forward to hearing more of the stories tonight. A big pillar of the Psychedelic Society is that we want to empower the individuals around us and provide an access point to education and community for people that are interested in these life transformative medicines. And a gift that we want to offer tonight is we're currently working on a microdosing course with the Flow State Institute and the Microdosing Institute of the Netherlands, and with Dr. James Fadiman. So we want to offer free tickets to all of the participants here tonight and all the veterans, so that you can come and join our community for this microdosing movement. So thank you all, and I will put the link in the chat and look forward to being in sacred space and community with you all. That's something that calls to you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Danielle. That's amazing. And thanks for reminding us there's an opportunity for these veterans to join this 6-week course for next to nothing. We just love to educate you and pass on this message. So without further ado, we are going to dive into getting to know our veterans today. And this is the part I'm most excited about. I'm so excited for all of you people to meet these wonderful veterans. We're going to start first with my dear friend Colin Wells at Veterans Walk and Talk. Colin, if you could take a minute to just tell us briefly a little bit about yourself and your nonprofit, and then we'll come back to you in a few minutes to really dive into your story.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dr. Fadiman, for being here. San Francisco Psychedelic Society, A Future for Veterans, Operation EVAC. It's the greatest privilege and honor of my life to help my fellow man this way. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. My name is Colin Wells. I am a U.S. Army infantry veteran. I am a veteran of the Battle of Marja in Afghanistan. I had a severely violent deployment. The violence that I inflicted and was inflicted upon me during my time in the Army pales in comparison to the tragedy and the horror that I've seen the veteran population go through since exiting the service. I've lost double the amount of guys that I lost in KIAs to suicide since being out. So that was kind of the catalyst for me to start Veterans Walk and Talk. And Veterans Walk and Talk is a peer support group. I heard you say nonprofit. We do get that a lot, but we are not a nonprofit. We are a grassroots member organization. Reason being is that I never really wanted to be backed into any specific corner, and I'm very political and outspoken. And so I felt like that was the best way to go. So we work with like A Future for Vets and Vitality and different fiscal sponsors in that realm. Veterans Walk and Talk was founded on a simple premise of community-based healing. It was basically, like Danielle mentioned, I was addicted to opiates. I was on 8 medications when I left the Army in 2012. I knew that I was in a bad way and tried to get help through the VA. I lived at the VA for 11 months, both at the Combat Trauma Treatment Center and the Substance Abuse Track at the West LA VA, if some of you veterans might know this place. And for as much as it enlightened me to the veterans issues that I was unaware of at the time, it also really was a detrimental period of time for me there. And so seeing that the VA wasn't going to help, I decided to help myself. And through being homeless and kicked out of the VA for my views and things like that, I came to cannabis in the hills of the Santa Monica Mountains, and slowly but surely started to come out of the woods like Sasquatch and get seen again and start to not be such a myth and be an actual healed, enlightened veteran. And so in 2016, I founded Veterans Walk and Talk. For 4 years now, I've hiked with hundreds of veterans all across the country. We have 250 active members, and we have a Sacramento chapter that's thriving. And we are now into the foray of Psychedelic Walk and Talks, which is peer-supported psychedelic therapy for veterans that I facilitate myself. And microdosing, mushrooms, psilocybin, it saved my life. I was I was a thief. I was a liar. I was in a lot of pain. I was angry and violent, and mushrooms rewired my brain and have brought me to the point where I feel like I am my most fulfilled self. And I feel like shepherding that information into the veteran community is my right and my privilege. And that's basically what I'm set out to do. Veterans Walk and Talk is, like I said, a grassroots movement which has impacted hundreds of veterans. And we are now getting into our own cultivation and our own medicine. The main goal of Veterans Walk and Talk is to empower veterans to take control of their own medical journey. And we have done that with countless veterans. We've had some failures, but we've had a lot of success, mostly success. And yeah, so that's my nuts and bolts of it.
That's beautiful, Colin. Thank you for sharing. And you've gotten a lot of love in the chat over the last few minutes as you've shared. A lot of people thanking you, congratulating you, and absolutely thank you for being a lead for veterans, introducing them to microdosing and psychedelics as a way to heal and deal with PTSD. So thank you, Colin. We're going to come back to you in a minute and dive a little deeper into that. I'd like to introduce next my dear friend Ryan Miller of Operation EVAC. I met Ryan about 7 years ago. I was working in the legal cannabis space and was donating cannabis to his vets group. And Ryan is doing amazing work. And Ryan, if you're there, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your group.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for hosting. And thank you, everybody, for showing up. San Francisco Psychedelic Society. I see Alec Dixon out there from SC Labs, Ron Millward out there from Balanced Veterans, and all of our Operation EVAC troopers. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. And so much love from around the world is here. So appreciate all comrades help spread. So Operation EVAC is recurring 90-minute social support groups with cannabis dispensaries. So for the first hour, we sit in circle and share stories, focus on forming positive narratives about our experiences and avoiding the veteran as victim mentality. And then we'll distribute some complimentary cannabis that we call Passion in California and educate about the safe consumption of those products. So after the hour discussion, 10-minute cannabis distribution and education, then we'll meditate for 20 minutes in a practice called I Rest Yoga Nidra meditation. And we've produced transformative results in our community. We've converted, angry, bitter, sour curmudgeons to warm, friendly, funny, caring, gentle members of a community. And it's been a privilege. And just to dig a little deeper, working to prevent veteran suicide has prevented my own suicide. I served in the Marine Corps from 98 to 02, served in Okinawa, Japan, Brunei, Bali, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, and Korea twice. Didn't go to Iraq, didn't go to Afghanistan. And these are the top two places that everyone asks me about when I identify as a veteran. And so I've lived with this experience of not doing enough, that I didn't go to combat, so I'm not a real Marine. And so, Operation EVAC has helped kind of fill that gap for me. And then I'd love to talk a little bit about what psychedelics have done for me too. So thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Ryan. That's beautiful. We're going to come back and touch on the psychedelic part in a minute. I want to pass it now to Alex de la Campa, a Future for Vets, and have him share a little bit about himself and his story.
Thank you. I just want to give a shout out to SF Psychedelic Society and Veterans Walk and Talk and Operation EVAC and everybody here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been working with Operation EVAC for close to 4 years now. Me and Ryan met when he was still hosting his meetings at Harborside. And then we met again on the bus to Standing Rock. And, since then, my journey has been really a process of growth and learning. I spent 4 years in the Navy. I was training to be a Navy SEAL. I got pretty far into the training before I got a really bad back injury. I was paralyzed for like a year. I went really deep into the substance and alcohol abuse. I had spats of homelessness. I did a really good job of pushing people away from me. And it took cannabis really to open me up to what the idea of healing was. And from cannabis, I've really been on this journey of self-discovery and growth. I've been working with Colin and Veterans Walk and Talk, and his leadership is just outstanding. I'm really proud to call him a comrade. And I run a Future for Veterans Foundation, which is a nonprofit that is focused on providing safe, predictable, accessible, controlled environments. And we are really trying to open up what that idea of healing is by having access to safe places for veterans to grow their own cannabis or cultivate their own mushrooms. And so that's really what our journey has come to at this point. I'm really happy to be in California, in the open area where, I mean, you know, thanks to this election, we have a lot more decriminalization happening, which I'm happy to talk more about. But I'm just happy to be here and hear everybody's stories. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it, brother. Great to have you here. Everyone, all these vets are getting so much love in the chat, and I am just so honored to hear your story and how far you've come. Lastly, I want to pass it over to Alec Dixon and have him share a little bit about himself and his experience. Go ahead, Alec.
Hey, good evening. Giving thanks to Great Spirit, to all my relations, to all those participating in this call, and to all the veterans that have served and that continue to serve. My name is Alec Dixon. I was from August 16, 2001 till August 16, 2006. I was enlisted in the US Navy. I was on submarines. So I spent my time in submarine service. Getting out of the Navy, thank God, I was not traumatized in the ways of war and the armed aggression that led so many vets to the deep suffering that they currently experience. But my whole time in service really kind of established this whole notion of service in my life, and I thank Great Spirit for that and for all the service that in my life that I've continued to evolve towards, in service to the plants and in service to cannabis and to all the sacred all the sacred entheogens, sacred mushroom, all the plants and the great gifts of this earth. In 2006, I was one of the co-founders of the medical lab. Excuse me, I don't know if my mic went out. Anyway, so yeah, 2010, we opened up SC Labs. So early 2010, last 10 and a half years of my life, I've been focused deep in the science of cannabis. And I'll kind of maybe just like leave it there. I'm excited to share more about my experience with cannabis and microdosing, how much that helped change my life and helped me really to embrace this sacred plant cannabis and how much it's profoundly impacted and changed my life forever, and led me to a role of service and education and helping to empower, each one teach one, empowering other veterans with the knowledge and information on how to, dose slow and titrate slow and get to the point where they can, embrace these, sacred medicines in our life for the most, optimal healing purposes, while kind of straying from, some of the negative effects that can really set us off from, wanting to go deeper with these plants and these medicines. And so, yeah, just ultimately really grateful to be here. And thank you to San Francisco Psychedelic Society and to all those helping to put on this this event. I'm really grateful to be here and to be in service to this great mission of healing.
Awesome. Thank you, Alec. And we're going to send it right back to you in a quick second, organically, just to talk about microdosing cannabis, as we're going to probably be talking about microdosing psilocybin from here on out. Just to be clear to any beginners out there that aren't familiar with what microdosing is taking a subthreshold dose of a substance, meaning you're taking a certain amount of cannabis or psilocybin, so you're not necessarily noticing it. It's below the perception of you actually noticing it. You're not high. It's not the classical large dose, concert dose, museum dose. Microdosing is very, very different. It's a subthreshold dose, and it has completely different effects than that of a classic dose of psychedelics. We can dive more into that a little bit later, but Alec, why don't you tell us a little bit about how microdosing cannabis has been helpful and effective for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So let's see. In my experience with cannabis, from what I've come to learn, cannabis with veterans, is an incredibly powerful medicine to help work with and through, the ailments and the reality of post-traumatic stress that comes. But for a lot of veterans that are new to cannabis, the endocannabinoid system is, very sensitive, and you could imagine completely virgin receptor system. A little tiny bit of cannabis really has a massive influence on lighting up your entire endocannabinoid system. And so across my time, both from my own personal experience as well as from working with many different people of different walks of life to help acclimate to cannabis, there's this common effect that a lot of people will say, oh, it's not for me. Or you see a lot of old timers that kind of used to you imbibe in cannabis but no longer do because it's so strong now, and it there's this this effect that can happen. And this effect happened firsthand to me. And the most appropriate way I've ever heard it described is it's called cannabis post-traumatic stress. And essentially what can happen, there's three types of people it can happen to. First time consumers of cannabis, people that take a long break in between. And then it also happens sometimes to regular users that all of a sudden will take way too big of a dose, accidentally or purposely, but it'll tend to shift the experience. And so what ends up happening is, to all these groups is, there's an overstimulation of your CB1 receptor, which is the receptor THC binds to in our brain. And the first time that happens, kind of your brain takes a bit of a snapshot of that experience and remembers, the oftentimes horrifying experience that can happen, the very incredibly anxious creating effect that, higher dose cannabis can bring. And so, veterans fresh out of the military, with post-traumatic stress, taking like a really high THC strain of cannabis and consuming it, even with certain terpenes that are more on the stimulating of cerebral side of things, can be really, problematic and set them off from, ever, possibly using it again. And so just to jump into my personal experience, when I was in high school, I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. I consumed cannabis a very little bit, but I joined the Navy August 16th, 2001. And for 5 years, I didn't consume cannabis, the zero tolerance policy in the military. So, alcohol was the, overall obvious choice, drug of choice, or that's endorsed. But, when I got out of the Navy, my buddy shared a bowl with me. I took really big puff of the bowl, and kind of got me so awkwardly and comfortably high. I had to go kind of hide under my bed and have my girlfriend at the time drive me home from, she had to drive me home from lunch. Right, lunch was getting set, and then I went and kind of hid under the bed for the day. And the first 20 or so experiences I had were horrifying, and I kind of came to that whole concept of maybe it's not for me anymore. And but I knew there was something about it that was really special. And I'm so thankful I followed that thread, because, kind of eventually, hard-headedly kind of broke through the wall, and, cannabis has then come over to change my life a million times over, for the most positive that I could ever imagine in my life. And so essentially what I've come to learn is, there's a very specific way to help veterans or anybody that to acclimate to cannabis that is very novice or hasn't used cannabis before. And what you do is you dose low and you titrate slow, and you work with those that have had a negative experience with cannabis that are opposed to it because of the fearful psychological experience that's created. You kind of help to you take high CBD cannabis, very low in THC. You do the ritual, you embody a ritual in your practice of grinding up the herb and rolling up your joints and kind of starting that process of your meditation. And then pair that with something pleasurable, associatively pleasurable, like going on a walk with your girlfriend, or eating your favorite dessert, or watching something funny. And you kind of keep that practice, right, that ritual in your life. And over time, kind of you can slowly start titrating up the amount of THC in your joint, or however you're consuming cannabis. And over time, you can essentially down regulate your receptor system to the point where you acclimated to cannabis, and it then goes off to become one of the greatest allies that we have in our life, especially in helping to and through a lot of the stress that we experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Alec. That's amazing. And he mentioned something that I think is really important to remember for any beginner, specifically also with psychedelics and microdosing of psilocybin, is the idea to start low and go slow. In regards to psilocybin, a microdose is considered anywhere from 0.1 to 0.4 of a gram, or 100 milligrams to 400 milligrams. You really want to start low at 100 milligrams and really try and find that sweet spot where it is a sub-perceptual dose, and you don't have the feelings of being high. That's also great advice for anyone with large dose journeys. You know, you really want to start low and go slow, make sure you're in a safe setting and a safe scenario. So thank you, Alec. That's really beautiful because again, I think cannabis is a great medicine and a great tool. And so very often it's forgotten how powerful it can be in micro mini doses. Do you want to share one more thing?
Yeah, one more quick thing, from my experience, I've also seen, most of the Vietnam vets, Korean War vets that I know kind of in my life, all, use THC kind of as one of their primary healing, kind of mechanisms and daily medicines that they work with. Beyond that, obviously, microdosing psilocybin, LSD, et cetera, has become a increasingly more big part of their life. But a lot of the vets that are fresh out of the Navy, they can't handle THC, but the vets of the old school that have built up that tolerance, right? It's their number one medicine. And so again, I think it's just that process of helping to sensitize correctly, and that's I think why it's so sacred and important in the role we play as stewards of these plants and these medicines to help really set it up right. Because if a vet or anybody in our life is intended to use these plants but won't set it up right, and then they might not ever use it again, kind of karmically on us for not setting up properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up another great point, which is education is key. For the last 10, 15 years in cannabis in California, it was all about education, and it was all about re-educating people, because a lot of what we were told is false. And that's the same with psilocybin and psychedelics. And that's why we're here tonight. We're here to educate people. That's why we're excited in a little bit to switch to the Q&A with Dr. Fadiman. But before we get there, I want to dive a little deeper into some of these veteran stories. So we're going to start with you, Colin. Can you hop on real quick and just dive a little deeper into how you found psilocybin, your experiences with it, and tell us a little bit more about your personal story.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just echoing what Alex said, just seeing in the last 4 years of working with veterans, I've done the huge dabs and the huge bong loads and the blunts and everything. And then I've done the microdosing, and what I've found with the incremental dosing, every 4 hours, your body can kick into homeostasis, produce the right chemicals that you need, and your body is empowered in ways that, it probably wasn't before. So yeah, any veteran that's new to cannabis, by all means, please look into it, but definitely look into incremental dosing and take it very seriously. It can really change your life. I was as bad a drug addict as I like to say I was a really good drug addict, because I was good at it. I got my pills when I needed them. I used my infantry training to rob heroin dealers when I couldn't get my pills. I stole from my mother thousands of dollars, burned all my bridges, just terrible, but great at it. And it was an ongoing problem for me throughout my life, compounded by the military. The military didn't cause these problems. Growing up in a country that perpetuates the buying and selling of wellness is what did it to me. And that in my own responsibility, of course. So when I joined the Army, and I joined the Army basically because I was looking for an excuse to continue my bad habits, basically. I knew that if I joined the military and served honorably and fought hard and killed Taliban, that I could basically get away with whatever I wanted. And so I definitely got that out of my service. I got out of the military and I went full veteran. I say to veterans, never go full veteran. You wear it on your sleeve, you wear the hats, you wear the shirts, you wear the everything. You gotta let everybody know what you did in service. These are the types of habits in America that I feel the warrior psychedelic renaissance can help alleviate. We need to get away from the prideful factor of hurting other people in order to further our own agendas. So when I went to the VA, I mean, I could talk for an hour just about the VA, but when I went to the VA for help, it was right when I got out of the military because I was desperate for something. I was on 8 medications. I can't even remember them all at this point. It was Prazosin, which some veterans might know for nightmares. The VA prescribes Prazosin. It's a blood pressure medication. I was taking 4 at night. I would wake up from my nightmares or in the middle of the night and stand up and just pass out on the floor because my blood pressure would drop so fast. And I was on Adderall, Klonopin, Oxycontin, Wellbutrin, Prazosin, and a couple others that I honestly that came in and out. But ibuprofen, you know, every veteran knows ibuprofen. Take a knee, drink water, take an ibuprofen. That's basically the cure-all in the military. But when I discovered cannabis, I immediately responded to it. I was withdrawing from opiates at my mother's house. And a friend of mine tricked me and said he put opiates in a tea. Or actually it was Valium and opiates. He said it would, you know, he was going to help taper me off. It wasn't. It was a CBD THC tincture, and I immediately felt better. And then after I got over my anger at him for tricking me, I was like, wow, I'm hooked on this. But back to the VA. When I got out in 2012, I went immediately to the VA. I asked for help, and the help that I received was, first I had to go to the emergency room and say that I was having a mental health crisis, which wasn't exactly false, but it wasn't exactly true. I was in need of help, but I wasn't emergency room help. You know what I mean? And from there, they made me get a bed at the Salvation Army Haven, which is at the West LA VA campus. If some of you know how the VA works, a lot of their contracts are, you know, given out to other organizations to lease land on their campuses and provide services. So I was under the Salvation Army, which was basically a homeless shelter. And from there, I had to go interview to get a bed and get help. And I like to talk about this process because it's not known to a lot of people. So I'm a drug addicted, complex PTSD, addled, chronic pain veteran, all the issues. And I have to go sit in front of a board of counselors and doctors and basically convince them that I'm worthy of helping, that I'm a case that they could probably turn around. And the reason is because their success rate is so low. At the time, I believe it was like 15% success rate where I was. And what they do is they want to make sure that the guys with the right complexion and the right drug addiction are given beds because they are more likely to be a success story, and therefore they will get more funding. So I was sitting in a line with, you know, many other veterans, lots of people of color. And again, I wasn't as enlightened as I am now, and that's why I do what I do. But I saw these veterans outside sleeping on the street, denied beds, and some of them died right outside my building, right then as I was living there. So after being in the VA system, the Combat Trauma Treatment Center, and the substance abuse track, I tried to better it. I got better. I was on methadone. They made me take methadone in order to stay there. So I took the methadone and I stayed at the VA about 11 months into my stay there. And that's a long stay. That's a very long stay in these places. I was a pillar in the community there. I was on the board, moving up to president of the board. And they decided to move rooms because the shower was spitting out rancid brown water in the showers there. And during my time there, the VA received a $1.1 million funding, and they used it to put in new toilet paper dispensers throughout the whole campus. And while we all had brown water to wash in. So I was moved to a different room with a veteran that I didn't really know. I was further along in my treatment. combat veterans, angry guys. We were in the same room, we got into it, and my counselors at the time saw fit to use that as a reason to put me in the back of a VA police car and take me to the main hospital, put me in a padded room, pump me full of Ativan. Some of you on my Instagram may have seen the video. I was able to sneak my phone by putting it in between my butt, and I got my phone into the room before they took it. And the alarms were going off. It was just as bad of a situation as you could possibly imagine. And so when I got out of the padded room, they had put all my stuff outside my dorm, and I was not allowed back in. And I had burned all my bridges. Like I said, I was just starting to get better, so I had nowhere to go, and I became homeless right then and there. Luckily, the work that I had been doing was enough for my mother to help me out again, which was, saved my life. But I still went back to heroin and started smoking heroin and robbing heroin dealers and that whole thing. And then it was my friend who introduced me to cannabis. This is all relevant to my story because this is why I do what I do. I saw that the VA, that our country, that the government was failing us. After having 7 suicides from my unit in a short period of time, even one guy killed his entire family and then himself. I saw that there was no chance of the VA or our armed services doing right by us. It just wasn't going to happen. So I started looking into groups like Weed for Warriors and Operation Evac and Operation 1620 and all these cannabis groups that were advocating for that. And as I started to get better with my mother, I went back on the methadone. I discovered that, these things, that I was able to heal myself in many ways through cannabis, through hiking. So I started, I'm paraphrasing, but I started to get back into work. I got a job at REI, which is an outdoor store, and that got me back into hiking. And I was still on methadone, still using cannabis, but I wasn't using hard drugs, and I was slowly getting off all the pharmas. So once I started working at REI, I started hiking again. I decided to just start going on Instagram and posting where I was going to go hike, seeing if there would be any like-minded individuals that would want to come hike with me. No one came for a very long time, but not a very long time, a few months. And then eventually I started putting out, hey, if you come, I'll smoke you out with some of this awesome weed that I got. And the Beard Brothers met me in a Ralph's parking lot, and because I told them what my idea was, and they gave me, an enormous amount of cannabis and edibles and things like that to share on my hikes. And from there, it's been a snowball effect. Literally every hike has had more people, to where the point we've had upwards of 35 to 40 people on one hike. We've facilitated psychedelic retreats for veterans 3 times, which have had enormous success. The 15% success rate that the VA has, I laugh at that now. I have a 99% success rate as far as I'm concerned. And just recently, after 4 years of running Veterans Walk and Talk, I've decided to branch out into psychedelics. Psychedelics have always been something that I was akin to. However, the science of it and the neurogenesis and the many different modalities intrigued me. And I started to participate in macrodoses on the hikes with veterans. And then now it's to the point where we make a mushroom tea every single hike, and we share it to the point where literally every veteran that's hiking with us is on a microdose of psilocybin. I'm really excited Dr. Fadiman's here because in my studies of him today, first of all, I discovered that he's very funny. And that was really like a nice surprise. And and I liked, he said something that there is no science yet, just worldwide use. And the citizen science and peer-to-peer science is what's really shepherding the renaissance of psychedelics and microdosing. And for me, that couldn't ring more true. I grow medicinal mushrooms now myself. I provide them to our members. I don't charge anything ever to anybody. Microdosing rewired my brain. It continues to. I've microdosed today. And basically, what I tell veterans, because a lot of veterans are afraid to try these things. That's the biggest hurdle I find. You get a veteran screaming, "These things are great. Oh, I saw my grandfather, or the trees spoke to me, and I sang songs with my ancestors," and that's all fantastic and very fucking true. However, you know, it can terrify a veteran who's like, "I don't know if I'm ready to face these things," which is why microdosing is so important. My brain, the damage that I did through my 2 traumatic brain injuries, I was blown up twice in Afghanistan, very severe concussions. I feel like my neural cognition is at a peak because of microdosing. I'm able to comprehend things. I can read several books at a time, things that I just wouldn't have nearly the capability of doing before starting microdosing. And it's not just microdosing psilocybin. We're talking a mixture of cordyceps, lion's mane, 5-HTP, griffonia, bacopa. These things, they really do help. Curcumin, all these things. These are things that, yes, I see someone holding up her medicine now, 5-HTP. Ice pick headaches, cluster headaches, lupus, PTSD, anxiety, chronic pain. I've seen all these things alleviated through microdosing psilocybin and these other mushrooms as well. That synergistic concert effect is astounding to behold. I've facilitated mushroom experiences for active duty Marines and Navy since moving down to the Southern California area. I can tell you that, in my opinion, psychedelics may just be this country's saving grace. America is very new to this movement, but the return to this archaic, the neo-archaic movement, the new indigenous ways that we are hearkening back to, these are things that can seriously change the course of our violence, the course of our complacency, the course of our capitalistic mentality that is ruining veterans, in my opinion. We are bought and sold as veterans in this country. We wear whiskey helps shirts, and we go to, we don't talk about our problems, and when we do, it comes out in outburst. And these are things that can be changed through psychedelics. Every single person, every veteran who I've ever seen go through the microdosing experience with me comes out connected to nature and oneself in ways that they weren't before. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And like Dr. Fadiman said as well, you know, this may be the most boring use of psychedelics, but it's also the most impactful and the most profound in many ways, because like SF Society said earlier, you know, you can grow a tub of mushrooms and provide yourself with a year worth of medicine. That type of value cannot be quantified. Not only the cultivation and the process of actually growing the mushrooms, but the consumption of them as well. These are all healing, everything about it from top to bottom. And yeah, I'm excited to continue to shepherd the microdosing movement. And the one thing is, like, when I got out of the military, I saw that the VA wasn't going to help me, that the only people that were going to help me is other veterans. And I'm hoping that through this kind of talk and this kind of movement, that we can get more veterans open to this type of possibility. The compounding of pharmacology in the veteran community is tragic, and it's heartbreaking, and it needs to stop. I'm tired of seeing my brothers and sisters peddled and bought and sold and told that this will work and this will work, when we all know that they don't. And I'm tired of losing friends to suicide, and I'm tired of war, and I'm tired of violence. And yeah, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here, but
No, it's beautiful.
that's yeah, I mean, the microdosing, you know, any veteran that's afraid of it, this is what this is my analogy, and then I'll hand it over to Ryan and Alex and Alec. But when you are out in the woods hiking, camping, things that veterans love to do, certainly I love to do. You see a big lake, you want to jump in it. You know that the lake may be freezing and that it's going to be very cold when you jump in, but you also know it's going to be worth that plunge. That is psychedelics. It's worth the plunge. You have to face whatever demons are popping up. You have to see yourself in the mirror. And this goes from an individual standpoint to a country. America, we need to look in the mirror and do some very deep self-exploration and do an ego enema big time. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, that was a beautiful share. Thank you so much. You've gotten so much love in the chat. Please make sure and check that out. Everyone's so appreciative of your share. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move over now to Ryan Miller. I saw Ryan speak in front of the Oakland City Council as part of the Decriminalize Nature movement. He made just such a powerful and beautiful speech, helping, of course, the unanimous vote to decriminalize in Oakland. So without further ado, Ryan, tell us a little bit about your personal journey with microdosing and psychedelics as a veteran.
Thank you, Adam. And before that, just a couple more quick shout outs. I see Aaron Newsom of the Santa Cruz Veterans Alliance. They lead the way. And some of my favorite women in cannabis. We got Luna Stour. We have Nicole Redler. And we got Tangi, Marine Corps veteran, Tanjanika. Good to see you. Yes, I've been working with cannabis for about 10 years. And something that you liked that I said at that meeting was that cannabis is great for palliative care, for the day-to-day use, for the reduction of symptoms. But if we want to get to the root of our mental health issues, we need stronger plants and fungi. And so for me, I don't have as much experience microdosing as I do macro dosing. And I've used them to really process grief. And it's really just been there to help get me in touch with my heart, with my inner resource, with that part of me that says, hey man, you're gonna be okay. Right? That's what psilocybin has done for me more than really anything. And on the microdose end of things, they've helped even my mood, right? The lows won't get so low. There's like a threshold that they won't get below. And then it restores like an awe and a curiosity and a gratitude for just day-to-day life. And I don't know if I'm tripping, but it seems like colors are more vibrant. In nature, I could see more detail in the leaves. And so really, yeah, I love what Colin said about, the analogy about taking the plunge. Any veteran that's on the fence about psychedelics, I think it's just important you remember the mindset, the intention that you have when you're going into these experiences, the setting, someplace like Colin does in nature is fantastic. Just someplace that's maybe sacred for you or that's really safe, right? Safe, predictable, and you have control. So mindset, setting, and then dosage, right? Consider the dosage when you go into these experiences. And really, if you find yourself going to a bit of the darkness, right? Don't run from it. Just greet it warmly. Think, what are you here to teach me? What are you here to show me? I love you. And so, yeah, that's psychedelics have changed my life. I really think that they'll change your life too, anybody that's listening. And please get in touch with Operation EVAC, Veterans Walk and Talk. We'd be glad to help kind of guide you through this process as well as we can. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ryan. And I think the really great part about tonight is that there are a lot of really great educators that people who are interested in learning more information can contact. You guys can always contact San Francisco Psychedelic Society. Colin, Alex, Ryan are great, great people. For more information, myself included. Stepping into psychedelics is not something you really want to do on your own. You know, I liken it to hiking Mount Everest. You know, you wouldn't just grab a backpack and go hike Mount Everest. You want to prep for it. You want to probably work with a guide or a Sherpa. So again, there are a lot of great people on this call for you to reach out to if you'd like more information. Again, the San Francisco Psychedelic Society is putting on a 6-week course coming up December 13th, where they'll dive much deeper into a lot of the details behind microdosing. So thank you, Ryan. That's really beautiful. We're going to pass it over to Alex. And Alex, if you could share a little bit about your experiences as a veteran with psychedelics.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Man, Colin and Ryan, they truly are leading the way. And Alec, I really appreciated your share. My initial experience with cannabis was very similar to yours. I was higher than a kite. I was lost for 2 hours or 3 hours in my car. My friend came and knocked on my window. I was sitting in the driveway of his car with the radio blasting, like hadn't moved a muscle for 3 hours. And so after that experience, I really come back to slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So, you know, especially with like a lot of what these plants are doing is really just activating what's already there, right? So like a lot of these states of being can be achieved through breathing exercises, or a lot of other more, you know, natural ways. So I think what they do is they create this space similar to like what a therapist would do for you, right? But that therapist doesn't have their own life to live with their own perceptions and their own degrees of the human experience. And so you get that space with yourself. I've been microdosing probably for close to, 3-4 months with consistency. And I can tell that Ryan's, his explanation of it, there's a threshold. The lows aren't as lows. It's a more balanced feeling. I feel more sure of myself, more steady, I guess you could say. And, everything that Colin said too is just absolutely true. It's time for an ego enema. And so that's really what I'm about, is just trying to create that safe space. Sometimes people don't have the space to put on a blindfold and have that 4 or 5 hours to themselves without interruptions or stuff like that. So I think everything that evac is doing, everything that Veterans Walk and Talk and doing is absolutely essential in creating this space so that we can be that tip of the spear. We can lead the way. Veterans, the elderly, the mentally disabled or mentally ill, like these are all what people call canaries in a coal mine, right? The things that affect these populations affect them faster than they affect the general population. So the more work that we can do in this space, I think it will transfer over into the greater populace.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for your share. And a big debt of gratitude to all the vets that came out tonight and shared their personal story. That was really, really beautiful. We're going to switch now to a Q&A with Dr. James Fadiman. So if you guys have any questions that you'd like us to ask over the course of the next hour, please feel free to add them into the chat. Please feel free to also share your own personal experiences with microdosing. Maybe share which protocol you use and why. Maybe share with us which substance, and that'll kind of help us continue this conversation with Dr. Fadiman. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce to you Dr. James Fadiman. He's an American psychologist and writer. He is acknowledged for his extensive work in the field of psychedelic research. Dr. Fadiman received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Harvard University in 1960, where he was a member of the original Harvard Psilocybin Project with Ram Dass and Tim Leary. He received his master's degree and PhD in psychology from Stanford University. Welcome, Dr. Fadiman, the father of modern microdosing. Would you like to say anything to these wonderful vets? Please unmute Jim, please. Okay, Jim, we got to unmute you. Can we get somebody to unmute him on the tech side if possible? We're working on it right now. He has
to do it himself. We don't have the consent to unmute him.
You don't have the consent to unmute him. Okay, this is our technical challenge of the night. We're going to give a prayer out to the universe, and we're going to take our time here as Dr. Fadiman will see if he can unmute himself. Let's see here.
Dr. Fadiman didn't take his microdose today.
There he is. I hear you.
Actually, I blame it on my mouse. I couldn't find the damn arrow. Okay, so hello, am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. Welcome. Everyone's very happy, giving you the thumbs up. Thanks for being here, Doctor.
I am, I'm not usually humbled, but I'm just feeling like I'm hanging out with the kind of kids who never liked me in high school.
We love you.
So much tougher and so much more power. So I'm supposed to be the expert, and I'm, for the last hour, you know, all I've been doing is scribbling notes from what you guys have been saying. And I will suggest to Colin is that I gave a talk some years ago, and afterwards someone came up to me and said, "Hey man, I want to give you a vocabulary word." And I said, "That's cool." And they said, "Psychedelic." And I said, "What's a psychedelic?" And they said, "Well, there's a bunch of us that every quarter we all go out in the hills and we drop 100 mics and we hike." And it gets us back in touch with nature. And I thought, well,
a microdose.
Microdose, right? You got it. So, so the question of whether I know anything more than the rest of you is obviously, you know, way more than I do about all kinds of things. So, however, if I'm supposed to, I'll respond to questions. I don't know if I can answer them, but let's see what kind of questions are coming up, because what I'm hearing from all of you is that the work is so necessary and the results are so remarkable that you guys all are very quietly and very publicly basically saying we can't wait for the laws to change because people's suffering doesn't wait. And what I was particularly getting is several of you were talking about microdosing, just kind of steadying you. And that the lows weren't taking you down. Because we're all, right now, the whole culture is so full of lows. It's, you know, it's like walking in a minefield, or more like a field of potholes. No joke on pot. But what we're becoming aware of is that unless we're helping each other, we're not going to get through this. And you guys are the models. You happen to be working with vets, but I can assure you there's enough pain and suffering in the general population so that we need groups like yours. Really, as one of you said, we need someone in each community who's growing that little shoebox of mushrooms to help the people around them. And it's that level of helping each other that really has, I don't know, blown me away is kind of a cheap way of saying it, is moved me so deeply and admiring you guys so much. So that's like an introduction of a sort, but let's see if there's some questions, and if not, we'll just riff, okay?
Yeah, we got plenty of questions. I'd love to just start everybody off with you talking about a little bit about maybe Psychedelic Explorer's Guide and how you came to write this, and then maybe a little bit about how you came up with your protocol. We're going to touch protocols in a minute, but yours was really the first on the market. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that whole experience.
Okay, I wrote a book 10 years ago called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. I really wanted to call it Shattering Certainty because that seemed to me a better, like what psychedelics do. But my publisher convinced me that it's got to sound like it's practical. And it came out of my realizing that I knew some stuff that the culture was starting to forget. And so rather than have to rediscover the wheel, it's a lot better to just give people some wheels and say, hey, figure this out. So it's a book of in a sense, of stories. And it's also a book about how to use macrodoses safely. Because high doses do transform your life and can transform it in a few hours if either you know what you're doing or your guide or your companion or your Sherpa knows what they're doing. And so that was really the core of the book, which is I live in the world where a lot of my friends are in the universities doing the kind of boring and necessary research. But if I talk to a group of people and I say, hey, of you 500 people, how many of you are going to be in a legal study in the next year? And like one hand goes up. And I said, how many of you are going to be having a high dose in the next year? And, you know, there's a flood of hands. So that's what the book was for. And to take the stuff that we knew that works and also the stuff we know that doesn't work and put it out there in an easy to read form. And then there's a lot of other chapters full of different kinds of research and different kinds of stories and a bunch of famous people's first trips. So that was that book. And way near the end of my writing it, I started to discover microdoses. So there's a chapter on microdoses in there. It's really a few stories. And for the past 10 years, I've been working on microdoses. And microdoses are basically, and I think it was wonderful to hear it quoted by Colin, the most boring part of psychedelics. Someone defined a microdose as, I took a microdose and I got a lot of work done, including stuff. It was nice to someone in my office who doesn't deserve my being nice. After work, I went to the gym and I did one more set of reps. And I forgot I'd taken a microdose. That's a microdose, which is your system runs better and you do whatever it is you normally do. No mystical breakthroughs, no discovering that you are part of everything you've ever touched and all the mountains and all the ocean. Anaconda snakes don't eat you alive. You don't find that you can be in a deep conversation with your dead grandfather. None of that cool stuff. But you find that you're drinking less coffee, you're smoking less pot, you're drinking less alcohol, and you're sleeping better. If you're a student, your grades have gone up. There's a wonderful guy who is fairly serious in jujitsu, and he said it very nicely. He said, before microdosing, I would win silver medals. After microdosing, I was winning golds. And if you want to look in one of my favorite scientific journals, which I know most of you have read, this last issue of Playboy has a fantastic article on athletes microdosing. And not only because of social media, not only they're microdosing, is they're putting it up on their website and they're saying, hey guys, let us know what you've been doing. So they've got all these athletes pouring in all these stories. It's somewhat, not as moving as the stories from you guys, but making it safe for the culture to accept microdosing as a way to make your life, make it more likely that you can do what you want with your life. So
beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to read the first question from David Schwartz. He says, I have zero experience with psychedelics, but I've been struggling with chronic insomnia, anxiety, and depression. I've been told that mushrooms will amp me up, so may not be the best for insomnia or anxiety, but that LSD may be a good alternative. Can you speak to that at all, doctor, about maybe the differences between microdosing LSD and psilocybin, or at least some of the civilian science you've heard?
Yeah, the basic difference between LSD and psilocybin is almost nothing. The difference is simply in dose levels, that if you dose to the appropriate level of each, you get the same results. However, people generally feel that mushrooms are nicer to them, that LSD is kind of analytic and kind of no bullshit. So that may be a real difference, but in terms of measuring all the stuff that people in my world measure, there's no real difference, except that for high doses, LSD is 8 to 12 hours, psilocybin's 5 to 7. And if you're running a research project with expensive staff, the difference is between running one shift of your staff or two. So it's a lot cheaper to use psilocybin. And that's one of the major reasons why there's so much more research on psilocybin, because back in the days before the government decided we didn't want to know more, there were thousands of papers written about LSD. The year that it was made illegal on Schedule 1, which means no medicinal value and high possibility for addiction, none of it true, as you know, it was the most researched psychedelic drug on the planet, psychiatric drug on the planet. So it's had a long history. And the difference between them for that question is, for the insomnia, that's why microdoses are helpful, which is if you take a microdose of either substance in the morning so it doesn't disturb your sleep, it is likely that you will find the depression lifts, and a lot of people's anxiety when they're depressed is realistic. It's because your life isn't working and you're anxious about that. So for people with depression and anxiety, microdoses are helpful. Warning, if it's just anxiety, then microdoses tend not to work well, because what happens is you are more aware of your anxiety, or your anxiety is more. We don't measure. But that's a side issue. You who just asked that question, the nice thing about microdosing is you try it once. Worst case is, oh, it made me a little upset. Best case is, oh, I don't feel so depressed today. A lot of people after one or two exposures will say, oh, I'm back. Meaning that antidepressants, and I'm sure much too many of you know exactly what they do, they make it possible to have bad experiences feel not so painful. And as you know, if you keep taking them, eventually the word is called numb. And what happens when you microdose is same thing as with SSRIs, which is the bad things are less disturbing, but, and I think, I'm not sure which one of you made this beautifully, is the good things are improved. Sad, you're more glad. And that's a huge difference over SSRIs and antidepressants in general. So I hope that dealt with your question. And if you're afraid, then you shouldn't do it until you find people who you feel safe with and who will talk to you about your fear. Meaning if you're afraid of something, then some part of you has to be listened to, even if you're afraid with misinformation, because the part that needs to be attended to is the part that is misinformed.
That's beautiful. That's a great answer. Thank you. Next question from Christoph Heinen. When I take a macro dose, talking a little bit of larger dose, a day or two after is kind of dark and shadowy. Is this normal? Is this because of exhausted neurotransmitters?
It's not usual. I mean, one of the reasons that a lot of people like taking psychedelics is the afterglow is better than the experience, because the experience is often, it's hard work. So there is exhaustion. But after the hard work, I think Hoffman, maybe it was Huxley, said after their first experience, the next day, when they looked out into the world of nature, into their garden, it was like the first day of creation, meaning everything was crisp and clean, and the colors were not, not knocking you over, just fabulous. That's what's usual. And that afterglow can last as much as 4 or 5 weeks. If you're taking a psychedelic and you come out and it's dark and it's depressing, one is, again, look at your nutrition and look at, are you getting enough sleep? The other is, are you taking it alone? And is there something that your system is saying, we really want you to look at this, and you're not looking at it? The other possibility is that it's not good for you to take those psychedelics. Genetically, there's a lot of differences, and anything that's taken by a few million people, some people just shouldn't take it, and we don't know why. So you may be one of those. So that's a kind of range of possible answers.
Beautiful. This is the next question from Andy Sai. People with hereditary psychological disorders have concerns about taking psychedelics, fearing the experience may expedite the onset of the disorder. Are there any instances of this happening with microdosing?
Two things. One is the reason that the people who've been labeled as having mental disorders, and don't get me on labeling, I'm not fond of them, but that your life isn't working in some way and you agree with that, you can't get into any of the studies. All the studies say, we're not going to take people with all these mental conditions. Now, why are they saying that? One reason is because they're afraid that if you then flip out during the day or within the next 6 months, they're going to get blamed. So I asked a couple of researchers, what's the data on people with, quote, mental disorders and psychedelics? And they said, well, actually, since we never let them in our studies, there isn't any data. So I did what you do. I went online and I looked at bipolar, which used to be called manic depressive, which is a lot clearer. And I asked them, hey, what do you guys do about psychedelics? And like most people in our culture, they said, well, lots of us have taken psychedelics. And our advice to each other is, if you're manic depressive, don't use a psychedelic when you're manic. You're already just about to lose it. But when you're depressed, it seems to be very helpful. So that's information. In our study, where we basically said to people, tell us what you've done, meaning we weren't supplying any drugs, we didn't meet the people, it wasn't a laboratory, we were just kind of getting stories as we've heard tonight. And what we found is a number of people who've had the diagnosis of various mental disorders found that microdosing seemed to be helpful in just cooling them out. So the answer is we don't know in a kind of formal science way, but again, the nice thing about a microdose is if it isn't right for you, it's like if you can't handle really hot food and someone gives you a really hot pepper and say, this is really special, and you bite into it and you are in physical pain, you don't have to do this. Your body has said, this is not for me, even though my friend is eating these damn things. I remember, being in an Indian restaurant and I've gotten super mild and I'm feeling my throat cells are being slowly destroyed. And my friend who ordered it hot is smiling and crying and saying, this is delicious. So be careful, okay? But the nice thing about microdosing is not much happens. And if it doesn't work well for you, then you're fine. The next day, life goes on.
Jim, you've shared a story with me regarding a person that was hearing voices and what happened after they were microdosing. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, well, it's a recent biography, a recent beautiful story. published by Canada. And it's a guy who grew up in Canada, and he had a fairly awful childhood and a mean father and a lot of problems. And he had voices. I mean, voices that were definitely, he could hear them and no one else could. Sometimes he knew they were inside of him. Sometimes it felt like, you know, the walls and the windows were speaking. And this is happening from a childhood. And he is, that's a kind of classic symptom of what's called schizophrenia. Okay. So he is functioning, but he's functioning with these voices, and most of them are mean. Most of them are terrible. They're forever saying what a screw up he is, what a failure he is. No wonder people don't like him. You'll never amount to anything. They're just mean. They're not very interesting, but they're mean. It's like living with a bunch of, you remember for most of us, there were bullies at some point in our lives. Imagine those bullies kind of living, you know, inside you, and very happy at any point to just give you a punch. And he starts to use psychedelics, and he starts to microdose, and he begins to get some separation from the voices, that they aren't as disturbing. They literally are not as loud. And gradually he sees there are other voices inside him they're supportive. You know, you're doing really well. You know, given the problems you've had, you're remarkably successful. You know, you're a really nice guy. You really care about other people, even if sometimes you're mad at them, but you care. Kind of the people, you know, it's like having a good family, where you go home and you say, man, it's really been a shitty day. And your family says, yeah, but you got through it and you did it really well. And we're really proud of you. Very different. And what he says at the end, he says, I've now microdosed for a couple of years. My life is working really well. And I still have my voices, but I now have them in control. And there are two groups. He said, I have my mean voices, and he lists them. And I have my nice voices, and he lists them. He says, when the mean voices start up, I can ask the nice voices to help. So he's still got what we would call classic schizophrenic symptoms of inner voices, but he's now running his inner, whatever they're called, his inner family or his inner bunch of strange people that have come to live with him. So that's actually very new. That's just literally published about a month ago. He writes beautifully. And it's a very moving story of someone who, like a number of you, has avoided the mental health system because he doesn't think it's very useful, and found with microdosing just a totally different solution than anyone would have come up with.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Jim. We got a great question here from Beth Stein. Can you comment on the use of microdosing to assist in withdrawal from big pharma and antidepressants?
Yes. Yes, Beth, thank you for the question. The people who've written to us, a lot of them have said, I don't like my antidepressants, but I can't get off them. I don't like my antipsychotics, and I can't get off them. So it's not exactly called addiction, but it's called, if you go to the drugstore and you get a pharmaceutical, they give you this piece of paper, often in little teeny type. I read them. And one of them says, if you miss a dose, get on it immediately, or you'll have terrible symptoms, usually of the same condition you're taking it for. So if you're taking it as an antidepressant, it says if you miss a day, you might be profoundly depressed. You say, whoa, this is a tough medication. So what happens when people microdose, and if you go to a website called microdosingpsychedelics.com, microdosingpsychedelics.com, it basically says things about doses and when you should take them. It's kind of general information, but it has a little tab on medications. And it says, these are the following medications that you can be on and still microdose successfully. And there's 185 things on that list. Medications, pharmaceuticals, supplements, herbs, all kinds of things. And these are people who said, it's okay to stay on your medication and microdose, but what we know is if you want to get off your medication, and the technical term is called tapering, because pharmaceutical companies don't like the word withdrawal. You can taper down far more easily with less danger if you're also microdosing. So it's one of the uses. And that's, by the way, not only for antidepressants, but for whatever we call the, speed in all its names, Adderall, speed, they're all versions of speed. And they're hard to get off, as some of you know, in a different way. But again, microdoses can help you not crash as you lower the dose. But tapering has to be done far more slowly than you wish. And we have lots of people who are so relieved. I have an old friend, personal friend, was a student of mine, and he said, took him 6 months of microdosing to come off 2 antidepressants. He'd been on antidepressants for 31 years. And it took him 6 months and he got off them. He said, I have feelings. I have feelings again. He says, I kind of don't know quite what to do with them. It's been so long since I had all my feelings. He said, I cry a lot more. I embarrass people. But then when I'm happy, I cry. And it's wonderful to feel like I'm myself again after 31 years of medication.
Beautiful. Dr. Fadiman, what do you know about neurogenesis and the psilocybin creating neurogenesis? And in regards to that, do we know about the brain and the gut and where the most neurogenesis is really happening? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Neurogenesis, the creation of neurons, the creation of brain cells, or the creation of cells that are also in the brain. It turns out if you take some of those cells, either from the brain or from the gut, and there's more of them in the gut and in the laboratory, and you microdose these little cells, they grow in a healthier, more complex, more stable manner. They have more connections, which means they are more effective. They're healthier. So neurogenesis is one of the, at least in the laboratory and at least with little cells, and we have some other mouse studies, but you don't take people's heads off and measure their brains. Most people just don't like to do that. So what we have is the notion that what's happening when you're microdosing is you are building better brain structures, which would explain why people stop being depressed, have far less migraines, lots of other, some of them were discussed here tonight, some of the changes that people go through. So I think I got most of that question.
What about the gut? What do we know about the gut?
Well, what we know is, and you've probably seen the picture of the brain without much LSD and the brain with a lot of LSD. And the difference is that we now know that if you take LSD, you have more colored lines in your brain. And what the science says is more parts are talking to each other and more connecting. And any of you who've had high doses, you know what that means, which is lots of things blend together in your senses that wouldn't normally happen. Okay? It's not clear what the results of that after a certain amount of time are, because people who use high doses, you can't do that very often because one, is very expensive, and two, that isn't quite how the science thinks. What in microdosing, and one of you said, well, I've been taking it now for a few months. You can't do that with high doses. So we're getting a very different, it's kind of, again, the description is like weightlifting, which is your body is learning how to use the advantages of the microdose over time. So
Awesome.
that's as good as I can get. Neurogenesis, sounds like such an incredibly cool thing, and the answer is we know very little about it.
Beautiful. We got a lot of amazing questions, so I'm going to move really quick. Is there any information about microdosing psilocybin for neuropathic pain?
Yeah. Well, two things. There was a reason, actually, usual kind of very conventional study. There's a way of measuring pain where you take normal people and they put their hands in ice water as long as they can stand it. And when they can't stand it, they pull their hands out and you measure. Okay, it's pretty clean and it's a very common experiment. Lots of things. People with a microdose, this is a higher microdose, this is like 20 micrograms, had about a 20% improvement, meaning they could put their hands in 20% longer. And that's kind of cool. But what was fascinating is that's the same effects as you get if you'd given them opioids. So here we have something about pain control that is equivalent to opioids. So that's really mind-blowing, okay? The other is we have a lot of people who write us and say, I've got a lot of pain from car accidents, from trauma, from operations, from being old. Will microdosing help? And the answer is, for many people, if they actually are tracking their pain, you know, is your pain between 1 and 10? Well, I'm a 7. And now I'm microdosing, and we say, well, what's your pain level? And they say, still a 7, but I feel better. And then we say, what do you mean you feel better? They say, I don't feel as connected to the pain. It's like I'm okay, and the pain is pain from I'm in pain. Someone once said to me, never name yourself after a disease. So nobody is a cancer patient. People are people who also have cancer. And so that also, which is separating the feeling from, or the symptom or whatever it is, from the rest of you, seems to be pretty general. So what I've said to people is, we don't know if the pain will be less. What we do know is you'll probably feel better. And I have this wonderful guy who I spent a lot of time talking with because he was so amazing, who had broken his back. Well, a machine fell on him. It broke his back in 2 places, top and bottom. And he was told there was an operation. And he was told that if the operation worked, he'd be much better. It doesn't work. He said, you'll be paralyzed for life from the neck down. He said, I think I'll hurt. And he was put on opiates. He was put on, but dosed very carefully. His physician was actually a professor at a university. And for 17 years, he was fine. He did hard manual labor for a living, and he took daily doses of opioids, which is, they were not addictive in this sense. They were just a medication that he was dosed correctly. And he had a social life and personal life, nothing amazing. And then the United States changed the rules, and he couldn't get his prescription refilled. And his physician was so incensed, not only with him, but his other patients, that he quit the university, he quit medicine, he also quit the United States. He's now he's growing flowers, literally, in Ecuador. But here was this guy. And what he learned was that cannabis helped, and that microdosing helped. And what he said is, on a day in which I'm microdosing, the pain is a tingle. He said on days when it's not, it's excruciating. So I give you that because that's where we are. And by the way, he was growing his own cannabis and growing his own mushrooms and living off the grid. So a very self-reliant guy. But that was what he discovered. So the question with pain is, we're just starting to learn how useful microdosing might be, but we know, or at least we don't have any cases where people have said, I microdosed and the pain was worse. So that's where we are.
Beautiful. Are there any considerations for psychedelics when dealing with traumatic brain injury or head injury? Can you talk a little bit about anything you've heard on TBI and microdosing?
Well, I have a friend who's got a whole bunch of people that he coaches, and a number of them have been professional athletes who basically, they didn't retire. They had traumatic head injury, and that was the end of their career. They also had, because they were professional athletes and well insured, they had lots of the treatments you get when you have TBIs. But after a couple of years, the medical process says that's about as much as we're going to improve you, whatever it is. What happens to most of them when they microdose is the headaches either go away or go way down. Their self-confidence seems to go up. Again, as that description is, the lows are handled. and they get their mojo back. They feel good again. And the report that, of course, is the one where you really know something's happened is when the guy's wife says, God, it is so wonderful. I don't know what you're doing for him, but don't stop. He's like the guy I married. So that's a whole area of discovery. And again, there's nothing in the macrodose world because probably because, again, this needs to be something over time where the system is repairing itself. And someone said, well, is it just a placebo? I mean, is it just the body's own healing? And my own feeling is, well, great. Maybe all we're doing is making a stimulant for the placebo, for the body's natural healing. And one of the early reports said, I don't care if it's a placebo or not, I haven't felt this good in 20 years. So it's an area we're discovering, and it's one of the things, as you can tell, gets me pretty excited.
Do you have any experience, or have you heard any reports about microdosing of ibogaine?
Yeah, just one that comes to mind. This was a woman who had a sleep disorder. She had not had a good night's sleep since she was 9. She's 50. She's been through every sleep lab and drugs and everything that could be imagined, and she sleeps very badly. She had a group session in a country where it's legal, called Canada, of ibogaine. And after that session, whatever else happened the night afterwards is she slept through the night. And she now sleeps normally. And she takes a microdose, just a tiny amount of ibogaine every day.
That's amazing.
Not the protocol that we recommend, but that's what she did. And I said, why do you do that? She said, I want to stay close to the plant. Remember, those of you who understand plants have a personality, have a spirit. And so being close to the plant's spirit, which helped her in a way, again, there's nothing in the literature that says any of these things are good for sleep disorders. But that wasn't, she wasn't worrying about that. Most of the other people in her ibogaine group were people coming off of addictions. So that's an ibogaine story. And a bunch of ibogaine clinics want to do a study where they want to see what happens when people leave their clinics if they continue to microdose with ibogaine. So we don't know much, but what we do know is pretty.
Beautiful. Can you comment on microdosing for someone who has come off of antipsychotic medication after 20 years? This person may have been misdiagnosed when prescribed the drug. However, hard to tell due to the long-term effects. They are now feeling unstable after coming off the drug 6 months ago. Do you feel it's safe to try microdosing?
Again, the nice thing is, do I personally feel so? Sure, but that doesn't mean much because I don't know them. Would I say to them, you could try it once? You're certainly not going to go have whatever wherever you were on antipsychotics 20 years ago, whatever that was is way older. And again, drugs get given to people often on very, very little information. Beautiful friend of mine was depressed and sad and miserable, and had moved from having her own life and career and boyfriend to living in the basement of her parents' house, having left her parents some years ago. This was not a basement set up for living. And she ended up having a breakdown and being put in the emergency room, and somebody saw her for 15 minutes and put her on antipsychotic medication. And took me months to help her get off the antipsychotic medication, which she never needed. So it's very hard to know when a person, and the story you gave me suggested that it's not clear why the person was on it in the first place. And it's kind of scary to think that you can be on a medication that's very strong for 20 years without checking. You know, how's it going? It's, imagine some of you, a lot of you have had broken bones and you put a cast on. And then you checked how the wound was going, how the bone was going, and when it was okay, you took the cast off. Well, we can do that because we can take an X-ray of the bone. You can't take an X-ray of the psychotic episode or whatever it is. So we don't know when people would be better if we took them off the medication. So that's a whole nother set of issues. And fortunately, as I listen to some of you guys, there's no lack of energy to help people recover from excess pharmacology. Doesn't mean that many of the drugs are terribly useful, often short term, but the problem for a psychiatrist is they don't have very good tools. They're perfect. If you talk to most psychiatrists, they will tell you the medications I give are inadequate, but they're all I've got. And so we're saying to them, well, here's some things which happen to be illegal, but that's their only defect, and they may help your patients. And I was talking to a couple of therapists the other day that I'd never met before, and they hadn't met each other. This was a Zoom class, but each of them had been personally microdosing, but couldn't tell their clients. So that's where we are.
Beautiful. Jim, can you just talk in depth for a minute or two about the Fadiman protocol, what exactly it is? Obviously, we want everybody to understand that microdosing isn't something that you do 7 days a week. And there are 3 major protocols out there, yours being the first and the more popular one, most popular. Can you please talk a little bit about the Fadiman protocol and how you came up with that?
One of the things we know about psychedelics is you can't take them daily. High dose. You take a high dose on Monday, you see God, you're transformed, your entire life passes before you, you're in ecstasy, and food tastes really good. And you think the next day, whoa, I'm going to do that again. And you take it the next day, same amount, and you have a nice day, but the heavens don't open up. Food still tastes good. But all of that excitement hasn't happened. And you say, well, I think I'm going to take some more tomorrow. I can see that you just need to up the dose. And so you take twice as much on the 3rd day and nothing happens. That's called tolerance. It means the system doesn't accept any more input of psychedelics. Okay, so that we know. With microdosing, the question that I started to ask was, how long does it last? Remember, we talked, I think, a little bit about the glow afterwards. Well, with microdosing, it turns out for most people, so you take on day 1, day 2 is still much the same. And lots of people write and say, boy, the 2nd day is even better, because there's no psychedelic left in your physiological system. It's just you making use of the changes that your system has made with the help of the psychedelic. So I developed a protocol, because the protocol means, you know, how often you do it. And I developed a 3-day protocol because I was trying to learn what were the effects of microdosing, because nobody knew. And certainly I didn't know. So people would take it on day 1 and they would make notes about what happened. They would not take it on day 2 and make notes about what happened. That's how we got the 2nd day effect. And day 3, in my theory, was you come back to ground. If you were depressed, you'd be depressed. So forth. And therefore, on day 4, if you took a microdose, you would re-experience something and you'd be better able to tell that was because of the microdose. So that was the notion, which is day 1, take it. Day 2, feel good that you're still taking it. Day 3, don't feel so good and notice the difference. And then day 4, do the thing over again. And we asked people originally, do it for a month and tell us, take notes and tell us. So I started to have lots of reports piling up. I then joined forces with a Dr. Sophia Korb, who said, well, we can make that into kind of conventional research and we could get a lot more people. So we now have this, we have like 3,000 cases of people who have checked off every day a lot of different moods, positive and negative, and we asked them to do that for a month. That became the Fadiman protocol. 1 day on, 2 days off. One thing we know is no tolerance. People found that whenever they took it, they had the effect. While I was assuming that they would be down that third day, after a couple of weeks, people say, you know, third day feels a lot like the first and second day, which is neurogenesis may have been starting to happen as their system was starting to adjust. And if they changed habits, like they were drinking less and smoking less, that of course had its own benefits. So people began to feel that this 1 day on and 2 days off was therapeutic, not just research. So the genie not only came out of the bottle, but took on a whole different form and is now very popular. The other protocols, and this is one by Paul Stamets, the great mycologist who knows more about mushrooms than everybody, suggests that you take a microdose for 5 days and take 2 days off, like weekdays and weekend. Also, he said, you could take it 4 days or 3 days. And I talked to him recently and said, hey, which is it? He said, well, you shouldn't be too rigid, one or the other. Okay. So he's not doing the research game. A third protocol done by, well, the best known is the Microdosing Institute in the Netherlands, is you take it every other day. So you're still preventing tolerance, but you're not having that perhaps third day off. And the results that they're finding seem quite similar to people who were doing the 1 day on and 2 days off, and fairly similar to the Stamets 5 days on and 2 days off. So what we're seeing is individuals need to figure out what works best for them. And what we've done is we've said, after a month, if you've been willing to do what we've suggested, you tell us what works best for you. And we learned two things. One is, if people were taking, say, 10 micrograms or 0.3 of a gram of mushrooms, more people would say to us, that was too high. I'm now taking less. I'm taking 7 or 8 micrograms. I'm taking 0.2 grams of mushrooms. So a lot, maybe 15% of those people would basically lower the dose. And so, and maybe 1 out of 100, maybe 1 out of 500 would say, I need to up the dose. So what we're seeing is people, after a while, as should be, work out their own correct dose, not what it says on the side of the bottle if we had bottles that we could give them. So I hope that's, I don't know if that's depth, but at least that's length. Okay.
No, beautiful and important to remember when people are trying microdosing for the first time, that they need to probably at least try it for a month to really get the benefits. 3 major protocols are the Fadiman protocol, which is 1 day on, 2 days off. Stamets protocol, 4 days on, 3 off, 5 on, 2 off. And then the Microdosing Institute, which is day on, day off. I think most importantly, what he said is no one size fits all. There's no one protocol that works for everybody. And what I see over time with people microdosing is they end up over time using their tuition to come up with the protocol all on their own. So again,
the other strong item that we discovered from literally a couple of thousand people is, on the whole, if people have done it for a month, if they don't have an extraordinarily difficult condition, they actually take it less often. So it is not only not addictive, it's actually, people say, well, I now know how it works on me. And either there are times when it's a good time to use. I was listening to these psychotherapists. One woman said, when I have an especially busy week, I microdose. This is seeing clients, seeing therapy clients. And the other therapist said, really? I feel exactly the opposite, is when I have a really busy week, that's not a good time to microdose. And I'm listening, I'm thinking, that's the point. The person is the person who sets the dose, not the pharmaceutical company, not the physician, not the insurance company, but the individual.
beautiful. What do you think the main difference are for veterans with PTSD between using an MDMA substance or microdosing mushrooms? Are there major differences between the two?
Well, the MDMA work, and it's fantastic, is high dose with, you're dealing with the deepest wounds possible. And I was so glad to hear that the deep wounds were twofold in war. One is being afraid of being killed, and the other is killing other people. And both of those are core, those break down, the core of the human spirit. The high doses get right to the core. And that's why you need the support. And they literally allow the brain to let go of the trauma, which is right in the front of the brain, called the amygdala, and be put into memory. So you still have the horrible memories of things either you did or the guy next to you did, but they don't run your life. Microdosing doesn't get to that place. And what we are learning is people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, if they microdose, they feel better, they feel less sad, they're more functional, they use less drugs and less stimulants, and they may be making real progress towards letting the trauma kind of out of its trauma box into the memory box, but we really don't know. So when someone says, if I could take a high dose of MDMA in a good setting or microdosing, I would say take the high dose. Similarly, and I hope none of you have this, cluster headaches. Cluster headaches are the worst pain known to human beings. And it looks like high doses of psychedelics break the headache. And that's really amazing. And there's a group called clusterbusters.org, clusterbusters, that go into all that in great detail, because every member of Clusterbusters is someone who has had cluster headaches. We also have a few people who've written us and said, I've had cluster headaches and I microdosed and they went away. We still don't think that's probably the best way, but again, we're looking to, one of the other groups around the world is doing a study, starting a study on just microdosing people with clusters. So it may be beneficial. So that's just one to keep in mind.
Beautiful. I got a good one for you here. I have a question about indigenous blessing versus universal access. What do you think about people using indigenous plant medicine without tribal accompaniment or blessing? For example, wachuma, peyote, ayahuasca, yahe, for the white settlers using it. Some argue all access is good access. Others, like Southern Mexicans using psilocybin, who think Westerners are polluting the cosmos here and ruining the efficacy, potency of the medicine's effect. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it may be self-evident that I have actually Ukrainian Russian stock, and I'm not, and so the indigenous work in Russia would still exclude me because it was Siberian. And the question is, does nature discriminate against, and it might discriminate against white people, merely because white people tend to misuse almost everything they can get their hands on? So the question from the indigenous world, from my point of view, not being part of it, is the indigenous world is helping us understand how to use these substances better, because they have a few thousand years more experience. And to not make use of that is crazy. And we're rediscovering and creating rituals that may be more appropriate to people of white European descent who haven't had that possibility. Psychedelic mushrooms exist in Europe and also exist probably in early Christianity, but they became taboo, just as they became taboo in this country for the past 40 years. So the issue, I think, is often that the indigenous wisdom is not being paid attention to. We started this evening with a prayer from Maria Sabina. And Maria Sabina lived in a little tiny village in Mexico, and she she didn't write that prayer. She said, they tell me what to say. I open the book and I read what they tell me. Now, she was illiterate. The mushrooms spoke through her, and she became a well-known local healer in this little village. She was discovered by some very curious white men, a banker, a CIA agent, all kinds of odd people at once. And she asked the mushrooms, what about these gringos? And she said the mushroom said it was okay to give the mushroom, to reveal the secret of the mushrooms to these people. Now, I don't know if that was the best solution. Personally, it's been really wonderful. And those of you who are growing mushrooms, your gratitude is not only to the mushrooms, but to the mushroom spirits, who she called the little ones, and to Maria Sabina, who was kind of willing to expose a secret that had been hidden since the conquest. We're terrified of the mushroom wisdom, because what the Spanish said is, they said, we get it from the Bible and you say you get it directly. It looks like, we're kind of second, not second rate, but kind of, we're not getting it authentically. We're getting it through a description that someone else had. You're speaking with God directly. And from the Catholic point of view, that was not okay.
Wow, you crushed that answer, Doctor. That was amazing. Wasn't sure how you're going to handle that one, and you absolutely knocked it out of the park. That was.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that.
Pretty good. I was really. It's very awkward because all of us who've been talking tonight, our lives have been transformed by plants used expertly by indigenous people, and most of you, as I look at you, are not you're not indigenous in that sense. So we are, I always think that the plants don't mind if other people do things right by them.
It's beautiful. Do you have any reports or any information with microdosing helping Parkinson's disease?
Not much, a little bit. But again, it's what I said about pain. I think of an early person with Parkinson's, and he had been a writer, so his journal was terrific. And what he noted by the end of the month is his symptoms were not improved, but his attitude was improved. He was no longer reclusive. He was being social. He was going to dances for Parkinson's people. It's very important for Parkinson's people to use as much of their motion capacity as they can. And so he was basically feeling better, acting better, his life was better, and his Parkinson's was probably the same. So we don't know much. And I know a few other cases, but not enough to have to try to generalize.
What are your thoughts on the healing mechanism with microdosing and cluster headaches? I know it's a guess. I know we don't have clinical trials, but if you had to hypothesize, why would you think microdosing may help cluster headaches, otherwise known as suicide headaches?
They're called suicide headaches because the death rate among cluster patients is 20 times the, whatever the usual population. And the reason people get cluster headaches is, and I'm not going to say anything because we don't know, okay? Because there's also two kinds of cluster headaches. One is where you get them in every few months, and the other is you just have them. Let me make a more general statement, because it's similar to people with menstrual problems or migraines or neuropathic pain, which is the system seems to be able to adjust better to what's bothering it. If you think about it, when you cut your hand and you cover it, there's dozens of things that go on towards healing your hand, dozens of systems in the body, from your white cells to, where does the debris go? Does scarring occur? All that stuff happens. When you have serious conditions, the body is still trying to heal itself. And it may be that microdosing indeed accelerates the natural healing available to the person. Okay, so we're not talking miracles, but we're talking amazing improvements are possible if the body can stop the self-destructive parts of the injury or the disease or the condition and work in the other direction.
If somebody was interested in doing a high dose MDMA journey and they were microdosing, how long before their large dose journey should they stop microdosing?
Probably at least 3 days. And that's the notion of tolerance. Even though MDMA and MDMA is not a psychedelic, sorry. It's classed that way because it works better for the culture. But you never lose track of who you are when you're using MDMA. Any kind of things that would normally freak you out or upset you or disturb you or that you deny existing. So it's easy to face truth and let it happen. But that's not a psychedelic. But it makes kind of sense to take a high dose session as seriously as possible. And seriously as possible is to prepare physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So the question is, should I pig out? If I overeat, should I stop overeating before taking MDMA? And the answer is, yeah, that'd probably be a good idea, because that would also let you know that you're taking yourself seriously. So microdosing is not addictive. So when people stop, they say, well, I'm stopped. One of the therapists who was saying, there are weeks when I don't microdose because I don't have any need for it. And there are times when I microdose, every other day because that seems important. It's not the same. See, we're caught in this myth of daily pharmaceuticals, which hurt you if you stop. In a sense, microdosing is more like, say, chocolate cake. You can take chocolate cake every day, but you will find that you develop a tolerance to chocolate cake and that you really want it only when you want it, because having it every day, actually the effect diminishes. And it's probably a very inelegant way of describing microdosing, but there you go.
Awesome. So we're going to be wrapping this up in the next 10 minutes or so. So if you have any last questions for Dr. Fadiman, please go ahead and put those into the group chat. Colin, you wanted to add something a minute ago. Is this a good time for you to step in and let Dr. Fadiman catch his breath for a second?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Fadiman. Absolutely fascinating and insightful. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring it back to the veterans issues and the issue of moral injury that you had touched on. What we're discussing here is, and Dr. Fadiman, in one of your speeches that I watched today, you had said that most pharma research doesn't go past 6 months. So these compounding pharmacological things that we're taking, these are 6 months of research they undergo. Then a doctor tells you it's okay, and all of a sudden you're taking it. What we're talking about here with psychedelics, in my humble non scholarly opinion, we're talking about healing the spirit to healing the body in order to heal the body and mind. And these things, that type of intention cannot be undervalued or even quantified, really. My own experiences with Wachuma, with San Pedro, like nothing has ever been the same since these things. I mean, all perception is a hallucination. What these things do is they open you up to the possibility of more. We're talking about the root of all existence. We're talking about miles of mycelium under one footprint. We're talking about the root of why we are who we are. And then to take it back to the sacred, what Luna was saying and what you, Doctor, were saying was so important. For me, there's nothing more valuable than intention and finding the sacred in the mundane and giving over to the spirit world. You can call it whatever you want, all other dimensions, otherworldly, other whatever you want. But these things, when you start foraying into psychedelics the way some of us have, they can't be undenied. You know these things to be true. You know them to be self-evident. You know them to be part of everyday existence. And you also know that once you pass from this realm, you go on to something else. And that is just a basic, and that's a basic need for humans to thrive and be in the moment and be better fathers and be better mothers and be good sisters and sons and daughters and pillars in the community. I just want to make sure that any veteran out there knows that, like veterans, we're in crisis. We've been in crisis for 20 years. We've been in wars that we shouldn't be in. We've had a suicide rate that is absolutely astronomical. What exactly are we willing to do to alleviate this? Are we going to sit by the wayside and wait for the right research? Are we going to say, listen, I'm scared of trying a microdose, but I'm drinking 10 beers a day? I have infantry guys who call me proud of the fact that, hey, Colin, I stopped drinking liquor. I'll be, all right, that's fantastic. Yeah, I only drink beer now. Oh, well, that's great. That's like, okay, great. I mean, you're still killing yourself. So what I just wanted to make the point of is the moral injuries that we incur as veterans are oftentimes, they're unseen, first of all, and oftentimes more impactful than some of the physical injuries that we face. And for veterans, I just want to, any veteran out there that's watching this, I want you to know, looking in the mirror, looking at yourself, using these different modalities, MDMA, Wachuma, peyote, DMT, psilocybin, yes, they're going to make you face things that you don't want to face. They will. That's part of it. But when you do it in a microdose, you do it with the right guidance, there's no better healing modality out there. It is what it is. And just give it the respect and educate yourself. Empower yourself with education, because these are the types of tools that are invaluable. And the more you learn about these things, the more we talk about it, the easier it will be for you to take that plunge into the lake. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colin. That's beautiful. We've got 3 last remaining questions, and then we're going to probably wrap it up. Jim, you're muted. Do you want to say something?
Absolutely every word that Colin said is what you need to remember from this. This is about microdosing. Colin's talking about your soul, and he's talking about what psychedelics do to show you your soul. Now, I mentioned very briefly the last 10 years I've been looking at microdosing. That's because nobody else was, and I got curious. The 40 years before that, I was not as clean about it. So don't lose track of the larger picture with the kind of smaller, daily, safer healing that microdoses give us. So Colin, if we didn't have COVID, man, I just give you such a hug, okay?
Beautiful. Thank you, Colin. 3 last questions we're going to answer, and then we're going to let everybody go tonight. I know it's been more than 2 hours, so thank you so much for sticking with us and all these fabulous questions and conversations. Dr. Fadiman, do you know anything about studies dealing with psilocybin or LSD, or a hypothesis on how these substances influence executive functioning, verbal learning, and memory?
What we know is microdoses improve all of the above. Both LSD and psilocybin, and we actually have a few research studies showing certain kinds of creative thinking is improved. We also have, I don't know, maybe a couple of hundred reports in the media from people in Silicon Valley that say I'm smarter when I'm using microdosing. I talked to someone last week, and this is the moral question as well. He said, when I microdose and I'm working with my team, I'm so much smarter, I'm so more creative, and I just love working with this group. When I'm calling to sell what our company sells and I've microdosed, it feels terrible. Now, my prediction would be that he would not last much longer at that company because whatever he was selling didn't feel right to him. And indeed, he is currently not with that company. So.
Beautiful. One of our last questions, do you have any information about the effects of microdosing on brain fog related to lupus and other autoimmune diseases?
Yeah, a lot of people basically say it helps. It helps clear the brain fog. And again, the word brain fog is a wonderful term because you can just tell is we have no idea what it is or how it happens, but lots of conditions have it. And when we're talking about, again, the prior question about cognitive and executive functioning and creative thinking, those are all above brain fog, but brain fog will, you'll have less, people report much less brain fog when they're microdosing.
Beautiful. And I just want everybody to know that we're going to make the recording of this talk fully available and free to all of you through a YouTube link. So I just wanted to answer that question that will all be shared with you. I want to plug a few things quickly before we go. If Ryan, Colin, Alex, Alec, anyone wants to share anything at the end, please share that. Quickly, I want to share with everybody to please check out the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. This is the amazing book by Dr. Fadiman from about 13 years ago. Also, Dr. Fadiman has a new book out called Your Symphony of Selves. This is a really fantastic book. Although he tries to claim it has nothing to do with psychedelics or microdosing, I do think it definitely can help you in the process of healing. So please check out Your Symphony of Selves by Dr. James Fadiman and Jordan Gruber. Seth, would you just take a moment and tell everybody about the 6-week course that San Francisco Psychedelic Society is putting on in a few weeks, where we can dive a little bit deeper into the education and information behind microdosing?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Adam. Man, it's really been a lot of fun listening to all you guys talk. I've just been, just hanging out. It's been really nice. We're gonna be putting on an opportunity for all y'all to hang out with us. It's called the Microdosing Movement, and we're not gonna just be teaching you guys. We're gonna be really trying to build community around this, because, like you probably heard again and again tonight, that's just as important as the information itself. We're going to have 6 weeks, and that's going to be every Sunday. There's going to be at least a 90-minute class with about a half-hour Q&A at the end where we could go a little overtime. And then during the week, every Tuesday, I believe, we're going to be doing a Zoom call a lot like this where, but it's not going to be like one of us up on a stage. It's going to be a discussion. It's going to be an opportunity to talk about your experiences, to meet other people. And we're going to do that 6 times as well. We just did a course this summer that went so well. We actually gave, I think, even 2 bonus Zoom calls to everybody because it was just, the vibe was so good. And just really, yeah, it's a good feeling to see people showing up for this. Tickets are $60. They start there, which honestly, it's like the lowest we could make it. We just really believe in this, and scholarships are extremely available. So please, don't let that inhibit you. There's a lot more to it. We're working with Adam. Adam, thanks for putting this together tonight. Jim Fadiman, James, Dr. Fadiman, you'll be there with us as well, so I hear. Sophia Korb, a close conspirator of yours, as you mentioned earlier, will be joining us as well. And none other than the Microdosing Institute from the Netherlands will also be on deck to really make this a just experience-packed course. And I couldn't be more excited to be sharing this information and to really kick off at least for our small community here, what really does feel like a movement, and something that I think is just so radical with such a heart-centered focus. It's great. So thank you guys for showing up tonight, and I hope that we can see you again. Thanks, Adam.
Beautiful. Thank you, Seth. And I just want everybody to know, everybody that's new to psychedelics and is looking for more information, there's some amazing educators here on this call. Please feel free to reach out to Colin Wells at Veterans Walk and Talk on Instagram, Alex De La Campa at Future for Vets, Ryan Miller at Operation EVAC, myself, you can find at Hummingbird_medicinals on Instagram. We love to educate and help people. Again, if you're going to go hike Mount Everest, you're going to take a Sherpa with you. So please reach out to Colin, Alex, Ryan, and then as well Danielle and Seth at the Psychedelic Society. If you have a report or your personal experience on microdosing, I know you can share that with jfadiman@gmail.com. Sorry to blast out your email, doctor, but he loves getting all of the good research and everything else. And I would love to end the circle tonight with veteran Colin Wells introducing the world to his beautiful new baby daughter, Willow.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much. Yes, I brought her in to say hello. This is Willow Wells. Hello, Willow.
Oh, Willow.
Baby. And if anybody knows about psilocybes and cubensis, willow root is one of the roots that can carry the spores in the mycelium well. So that's kind of like why we named her this. Look at that chin. She got my chin. Look at this little spore. That's a spore. She was a spore. Now she's a human. Crazy. Thank you.
Beautiful. What a beautiful little Willow there. Love to everybody tonight. If you have further questions and you want to message us directly, hop on, stay on the line here for the next few minutes. For the rest of us, thank you for all you've done. We will make this recording available to you for free. Please reach out to the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, Future for Vets, Operation EVAC, and let's not forget Veterans Walk a Talk. So thank you all tonight. Thank you, Dr. Fadiman, for joining us. Thank you to all the beautiful people who hung out for more than 2.5 hours. Blessings and much love.
Dr. Fadiman, thank you. You're a stud.
Thank you, Dr. Fadiman. Amazing.
Let's
could
do
have
this
hung
once a
out
month.
with me.
Gentlemen and scholar.
Thank you so much,
Once
Adam,
a
for putting
month.
this together.
Let me join you.
Hi, Danielle. Great job,
Thank you,
guys.
Danielle. Love you,
Maybe-
Danielle.
How about unmuted
Thank you,
round of
SF
applause?
Society.
Thank you so much.
Hooray. I'm out, guys. Good night.
Thanks, Dr. Fadiman.
Tell Dorothy I said hi.
Okay.
Some tacos for us in Mexico.
Shout out to Dorothy.
I got a million more questions.
Good night.
All right,
Good night.
later. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Love you, Alec. Thank you for sharing your story. That was a blessing. And thank you, Adam, for being such an incredible, just biohacking genius.
Love you, Luna. Thank you. That was a great question. I don't know if I've ever heard a better answer to that question. We'll have to share that footage with everybody.
Right? Do plants discriminate?
Just drop the mic after that, pretty much. Just drop
I mean, I speak to my cactus every morning. I mean, I talk to them like they're right there. You know, they absolutely discriminate. This one in particular is really kind of just a dickhead. So.
Oh, well, that's great. Thank you, everybody that came tonight. It sounds like you guys would love more of this. So please come join the microdosing movement. We have free scholarships for veterans. And we'd like to make a possibility for you all to join us and share your stories.
I'd like to also offer to sponsor someone and be a scholarship sponsee or sponsor as well. I'll throw an extra 60 in the ring.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
You got it.
All right, guys, I'm bouncing. Thanks to Danielle and Seth for always holding it down. You guys are amazing. Colin, Ryan, Alex, all the people I met tonight for the first time. Love and light. Blessings.
Peace out, man. Y'all could just like talk to each other, I guess, if you want.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Willow? She is willing to answer.
I was wondering, goo goo gaga, goo
Yeah.
gaga.
She says she answered by pooping on my hand. So yeah, whatever she said, she didn't like it.
Too bad.
Thanks, guys. One love to everybody.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you,
All
Colin.
right. Well, it seems like a good time to wrap it up then. I think we all gotta get some rest. Be well, everybody. Until next time. Much love.